a workshop meeting of the Township Committee for Monday, August 8th, 2014. The notice requirements provided for in the Open Public Meetings Act have been satisfied. Notice of this meeting was properly given by transmission to the Asbury Park Press, the Star Ledger, the Independent, and the Two River Times, and by posting at the Middletown Township Municipal Building and filing with the Township Clerk all on January 11th, 2013. Committeeman Fiore?
Here.
Committeeman Massell?
Here.
Committeeman Sharpenberger?
Here.
Deputy Mayor Zandino?
Here.
And Mayor Murray? Here. Could everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to take a moment to request a moment of silence to honor the troops serving worldwide, defending our freedom and way of life. Thank you. We have some action items on the agenda. The first item is the introduction of Ordinance 2014-3113, entitled Refunding Bond Ordinance, providing for the refunding of certain general obligation bonds of the Township of Middletown, appropriating $3,200,000, therefore, and authorizing the issuance of $3,200,000 bonds or notes of the Township for financing the costs thereof. May I have a motion to introduce Ordinance 2014-3113 to be held over for public hearing and final consideration at the August 18th regular meeting? Motion to introduce.
Second.
Committeeman Fiore?
Yes.
Committeeman Massell?
Yes.
Committeeman Sharpenberger?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Zandino?
Yes.
And Mayor Murray? Yes. Motion carries to adopt Ordinance 2014-3113. The next item on the agenda is the introduction of Ordinance 2014-3114, entitled An Ordinance Amending Standards for Commercial Filming. May I have a motion to introduce Ordinance 2014-3114 to be held over for public hearing at the next regular meeting on August 18th, 2014? So moved.
Before we second, I just wanted to summarize for the committee and for the public. As you're aware, we actually adopted this ordinance a couple of meetings ago. But after we did so, we did get some comments from the state office that deals with filming and production activity within the state. And they had some comments on the ordinance. Unfortunately, we didn't get until after we had adopted it, but some of their comments made some sense. So we just made a few minor kind of tweaks to the ordinance. We lowered some of the fees and changed some of the requirements for notification and timing of when productions can be filmed. They're relatively minor changes, and we can discuss them more thoroughly at the public hearing if anybody's interested. But that's why we're reintroducing it. It's a slightly revised version of the ordinance we already passed.
My only question, Tony, is do you feel that the changes still have, not that I'm saying they don't, but that they still have enough protections in so much if you have a filming or a show or a movie in which, say police presence needs to be available, that the cost would be covered?
Yes. Yeah, I don't have any issue with our costs being covered.
Second.
Committeeman Fiore?
Yes.
Committeeman Massell?
Yes.
Committeeman Sharpenberger?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Zandino?
Yes.
And Mayor Murray? Yes. Motion carries to introduce Ordinance 2014-3114. The next item on the agenda is a resolution 14-209, authorizing the payment of bills for August 4th. May I have a motion to adopt this resolution?
Second.
Committeeman Fiore?
Yes.
Committeeman Massell?
Yes.
Committeeman Sharpenberger?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Zandino?
Yes.
And Mayor Murray? Yes. Motion carries to adopt Resolution 14-209. Next, we have Resolution 14-210, entitled Resolution Awarding Non-Fair and Open Professional Service Contract for Special Labor Counsel for Negotiations. May I have a motion to adopt this resolution?
Second.
Committeeman Fiore.
Yes.
Committeeman Sal.
Yes.
Committeeman Schaukenberger.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Sandino.
Yes.
Mayor Melham. Yes. Motion carries to adopt resolution 14-210. The agenda items listed for August 15, 2014 for discussion. First item, there will be a police officer who will receive his oath of office, Thomas Foster. Item number 2, there will be a presentation to a fire company member for years of service. And item C, I have it listed as a proclamation. It's drive sober or get pulled over 2014. It's in conjunction with a grant application. So we have to adopt something before the grant can be applied for. So that will be on as a resolution on the 18th. Item 8 is the approval of minutes. We will have minutes for May and June. Public hearing of ordinances. The 2 ordinances that were introduced tonight will be on for public hearing. And at this time, there's none for introduction. The consent agenda, which would be resolutions, bingo and raffle applications, and fire department applications. And then we're on to item 12, which is discussion. Item A is the local ABC state issued licenses, and I think Brian
Yeah,
has
we can
some
start that. So we have, in the Township of Middletown, we have an ordinance in place that currently limits the distance between both plenary retail and plenary consumption license holders for alcoholic beverages. The state of New Jersey, and that ordinance was adopted back in, I want to say 2003 or thereabouts. The state of New Jersey in 2012 adopted a number of new licenses or forms of new licenses for things like microbreweries and wineries and wine-related businesses and things of that nature, which are not either classified as plenary or retail or consumption licenses. Under plain reading of our ordinances would not apply to these licensees, which fall kind of under the category of hotels that have a certain number of rooms and so forth can require a liquor license that way. They fall under kind of a special category. It's not currently addressed in our ordinance. The issue's been raised by other license holders in the township as to whether the township intends to or plans to adopt any regulations to address these, because the question was raised as to whether our ordinance currently applies to these types of establishments, which it doesn't address and couldn't have really been contemplated years before this law was enacted recently, and we're starting to see these sorts of applications come into the township now, and at least in one instance. So, but I would suspect over time there may be more because of the low cost of entry to open these sorts of businesses compared to other license holders who have to pay a substantial amount of money for the limited pool of licenses that are available. These are effectively unlimited to a certain extent as far as the state's issuance of these licenses are concerned. The state ABC says that municipalities can enact regulations, local zoning laws and so forth as to uses, of course, and then regulations as to similar to what we have with this 2,000-foot distance between licensed establishments. So it's up to the committee to determine, policy determination as to whether it wants to consider amending this ordinance provision to address this in the future as to, if special licensees come in, as to the distance in which they could be from other licensed establishments, whether they're other special licensees or other plenary and retail consumption and retail license holders in the township. So I have that one for discussion. And anybody has any thoughts on it, feel free to pass them on to me. I know I had individual discussions with some of you regarding this because the questions raised. That's all I have on that one.
Okay, excuse me. Item B is the four-way stop intersection at Rodney Park. think, Ted, that's your...
Yes, some of you remember, this has been talked about in the past, based on a recommendation by the Police Traffic Division and the concerns of the residents in that area. This is the entrance to Bodman Park through Market Street and the intersection of Patterson. There's a lot of traffic coming through there, especially during Saturday games. The residents are concerned because there are a lot of children around the park, and especially right around this intersection. So based on the recommendation by the police department and the manual of uniform traffic control devices for pedestrian protection, I'm recommending that an ordinance be adopted to put a four-way stop at this intersection.
I would agree with that. I've actually had some discussions with some of the residents, and I know that area well, so I think that's a very good idea.
I agree.
So on the 18th, there'll be an ordinance for introduction. That item.
Great.
The next item, C, is the renewal of a liquor license, Hard Dock Liquors, which is a pocket license, and from the state we received special ruling to go ahead and renew that. Item D is Phalanx Road parcel transfer requested by the Monmouth County engineer.
Hand these around. These should be in your packet, but I'll hand these around. These are a map of that area. Probably 35 years ago, the intersection of Phalanx and Route 520 was realigned, and the county obtained some property, I believe from Brookdale, and some, maybe it was their own property, to realign Phalanx to a better configuration. And that property was never transferred back to the township. And the intention at that time was that it be transferred back to the township. Phalanx Road, in Middletown at least, is a township road, and it's paved by the township and plowed by the township and maintained by the township. So the request of the county is to transfer this property now back over to the township from county ownership.
How big is the property? Because there are many things on this map.
The shaded areas are
The shaded area.
Why would we want that back?
Had just this little piece here.
Piece on the bottom right,
Right.
and then the whole road, this, the relocated Phalanx Road is actually still under county ownership. So those two sections will be transferred, this section here and this little section here.
The actual road, you mean?
Yeah, well, it's the property, it's the right of way.
The shaded part you see here is just the new realigned section of Phalanx. But the whole rest of Phalanx Road, as it goes through the neighborhood and then past Brookdale and over to the reservoir, that's all township. So it's kind of a road that is township, 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 and the last little section of it became county because they actually realigned it. They did the work to realign it and went through Brookdale property, which was county property. So it kind of doesn't make sense to have a road that's, 90% township, a little end piece under the jurisdiction of the county. We're in discussions with the county, by the way, over
The gas station.
It's next to it.
by the cul-de-sac there, so yes. We've had some discussions with the county about other roads that we're going to be coming back to talk about swapping the township roads that they're going to take jurisdiction of and vice versa, some of which may make more sense going forward. So this is kind of just a...
Well, let me ask a question in that vein. Is there any particular reason why we wouldn't visit this on an annual basis or a biannual basis rather than just so that we can get some benefit out of that rather than saying we're going to do it piecemeal, at the county's convenience or, and in this case, it's at the county's convenience.
Sure. I mean, we could say the county will do this in conjunction with a package of changes that...
So, if there's some benefit for the township with regard to moving one piece as opposed to another, I'd rather see it in the package. Yeah.
That's fine. It's a good idea.
So,
We can do that.
In the past year, we have Tony and I and Jason Greenspan and Neil Hansen from the Traffic Division. We've been having quarterly meetings with the county to bring up those topics every few months. And that is one topic that comes up every meeting is the transfer of roads and swapping of roads out. Makes sense.
So good suggestion, Kevin.
2 Lee Streets for 1 house.
It's kind of like trading baseball cards.
The next item is amendment to ordinance for dune protection. Tony, I'm not sure what's the dune protection ordinance?
Yes, I just put this on as a discussion item. because I think that it's something the township needs to start to address. As you know, the beaches, for the most part, have been substantially replenished, and the dunes are in the process of being made healthier, essentially. New plantings are going to go into the dunes, first in the East Keensburg, North Middletown's part of the dunes, and then subsequently Port Monmouth, when they're finished with the other work. The dune plantings will primarily be like November timeframe. But what we're seeing in both the Port Monmouth section and North Middletown is a lot of people accessing the dunes in areas other than the crossovers that they're supposed to be utilizing. And in fact, we had a case, I think it was last week, of a vehicle actually going over the dunes in Port Monmouth in order to launch jet skis and things like that. And the reality is we don't actually have we don't have strict enough regulations about limiting dune access. I know you're at other places in the Jersey Shore, if you step on the dunes, man, they're right there issuing you a ticket or threatening to issue you a ticket. And I think we need to tighten our ordinances with regard to protection of these dunes, because we want to limit the access to the dune crossover, established crossover areas, which we're getting signs for now to identify where those places are. But right now, if we catch somebody driving through a section they're not supposed to drive through, there's really not a heck of a lot we can do about it. So we just need tighter ordinances, especially now that all this public money essentially has been invested in reestablishing them properly. So we're going to prepare some ordinance recommendations for the committee the next month or two, and we can discuss them.
Great.
We also, Tony, need to think about, as you're thinking about ordinance changes, and I don't know if we have to spell ordinances, but now that the beaches have been replenished, especially an Ideal Beach, parking's going to become a much greater issue in that neighborhood, and probably in the Port Monmouth neighborhood after that's done too. So whether it's no parking zones, yellow curbing,
Well, one of the things we're doing,
resident parking.
one of the things we found at Ideal Beach is the crossovers of the dunes to access the beach don't have any barrier-free surface or easily walked-on surface. So people are tending to go to the one spot where it's the easiest. But yet there's 2 or 3 other access points that they could use, but they're just kind of a hard walk. We're actually looking and speccing out some material to place on the dune to create a proper crossover. And that'll, I think, help with parking situations. Since right now, of course, everyone wants to park right near the place they're going to actually access the beach. If we make 3 different sections where you can access the beach, people will spread out the parking. That'll help a little bit. But I agree, for big events and things like that, people will park in neighborhoods, and we have to address that.
The next item on the agenda is the change order for the 2013 road resurfacing contract.
It's the mid-block crossing.
Oh, I apologize. The mid-block crosswalk at the Milltown Arts Center.
We brought this up at, I think it was the last workshop, and an ordinance is required for this crosswalk. Right now, we have it being designed, the actual ramps and the crosswalk itself being designed as part of our road program, and an ordinance has to be introduced and adopted for this location on the county road.
So that should be on the also.
That should be the
Assuming we approve that, how long before we get done?
Well, it's in design now, and it'll, by the,
So it's in the contract we're designing now. Design will be complete by the end of the month with advertisement and bid in September. It's one of a few tasks. Wilson Avenue is another, so that's critical road. So I would say, fall of this year, worst case, spring of next year, depending on,
Sorry, I just have a question. You mentioned ramps. What do you mean when you're saying ramp?
the accessible ramps to the cross.
Oh, I see.
From the
Okay.
parking lot and from the cultural center. So.
Okay.
The crosswalk is at that island.
Well, that's what I wanted to ask you. Is it on an elevated piece of, okay, I understand.
It is,
Yeah, right now the curve is a 6-inch full-face curve. It's got to be modified to accommodate.
Right, okay, great.
Okay, now we have the change order for the road resurfacing contract. Next item is a release of a cash bond for White Eagle Builders, recommended by Engineer Taglioni. And item I is the LoSAP ordinance amendments.
Yes, as everyone knows, Middletown has one of the largest volunteer fire departments in the state, if not the world, frankly. And I think somebody brought this subject up in a recent meeting as to how much money the township, of course, saves through all these volunteer efforts. And just to give you an idea of a similarly sized municipality that has a paid fire service, Cherry Hill Township down in Camden County pays almost $26 million a year for its paid fire service. Very comparable town in size and build out population to Middletown, just to give you an idea of what those costs are. In 1999, the township voters decided that Middletown should participate in the LoSAP program, which is the Length of Service Award program for volunteers, the volunteer fire companies and rescue squads. That ordinance has only been amended once since adoption in 2003, and arguably it's been somewhat of a success since we don't have a significant problem with, at least on the fire company, locating volunteers, willing and able-bodied volunteers. We have had some issues arise, though, as we've gone through the process of certifying these LoSAP credits. In large measure, I think because of some of the ambiguities and vagueness that exists in our current ordinance, I think there's a couple things that could be addressed to help clarify better for the squads. And how this works is there are individual, I'll refer to them as secretaries, so to speak, in each rescue squad and fire department that throughout the course of the year maintain the records relating to the allocation of credits. So for when people respond to calls, or when they do drills, or attend training sessions and other things of that nature, or serve in a capacity as an officer, appointed official, as a line officer in these fire departments or rescue squads, they receive LoSAP credit. In order to qualify for a credit, they have to receive a certain number of points a year, and based on their years of service, they get a contribution into a LoSAP account that's made by the township at the year after the credits are accumulated. So these certifying officers in each department of rescue squad submit this data to the township, and the township's finance office reviews the data, double checks it, does a couple different checks to make sure everything checks out, make sure that people have been on the rosters and so forth, and their positions in the departments as best as we can. But of course, this information is only as good as what we receive from the departments and the squads, and so it's not an easy job of verifying. So for example, the way the ordinance is currently structured, it says that you have to be an active member of the fire department or rescue squad. Well, the definition of active members can only be found in individual bylaws of every fire department and rescue squad, for example. So we thought it would be a better amendment to, for example, define exactly what an active member is as far as the township is concerned for ordinance purposes, so we don't have to try to figure out from every squad and fire department's bylaws, which do change from time to time, what their definition of an active member is, which sometimes isn't necessarily perfectly in correlation with what the statutes require for an active member for LoSAP purposes. So we better define that in the ordinance, so we'll take that issue out, and it's something that we can more easily verify and certify on our end before making these contributions. Other issues that have arisen are, what is a year of service? Is a year of service years that an individual was eligible, for example, to be in LoSAP, or years that they actually served as a member of a rescue squad or fire department, maybe with a break in service at some point where they may not have been an active member, or they may have ended up becoming a life member or something in that regard. Then as well, there have been issues and some confusion over what constitutes an elected or appointed official or a line officer in the fire department or rescue squad. Again, here you have a great variance in the bylaws of all the individual squads and companies as to what constitutes an elected or appointed official and the line officer. So that's something that we'd probably seek to clarify through the ordinance, so that there's not this ambiguity or differential between the different companies and squads. Another issue that arises, we have a number of volunteers that are very helpful to both rescue squads and fire departments. In many cases, there are multiple fire departments or rescue squads that they're members of. Now, it's pretty clear in the statute they can't receive they can dual enroll in LoSAP, but they can't receive dual credits above the statutory maximum contribution each year. One of the things that we can look at doing to encourage participation, however, is the statutory maximum has increased a little bit from when this program initially instituted. It's gone up about $100. We can increase the maximum contribution, annual contribution, if you'd like. Another thing that we'd like to do is to conduct annual audits through our township auditors. It's something that we can do in an ad hoc basis, or we can require this as a provision under the ordinance as well. Another thing that we think would be useful, based on talking to a lot of folks from the different fire departments and rescue squads, is to provide annual training to whoever the individual certifying secretaries or officers are each year that submit the data to the township, so they know exactly the information and backup that the township needs in order to submit these credits to be deposited in the account the preceding year, so that they understand what the rules are and understand what an officer is that's eligible and what an active member is that's eligible and what the other program rules are, because there seems to be differences of opinion and views between them vary greatly depending upon who you talk to. Which should be corrected if we clarify some of these things in the ordinance. Some other just definitional changes as to what the sponsoring agency is, which would be the township, and defining what the roles of the certifying officers are, and make them understand and know exactly what their jobs are. There's also some confusion as to how you count the numbers of calls for fire departments and rescue squads. Is specific to the overall department or each individual squad, and that needs to be clarified in the ordinance. And then we have also other ordinances separate and apart from the LoSAP ordinance that at different times, and I'm not clear in the legislative intent or history of, have said, put maximum numbers on the allowable number of active members in the fire companies. At least I don't think the rescue squads are addressed, but some say it's 30, some say it's 45 per company. They don't seem to have any logical basis or make sense, but it's something that needs to be addressed and looked at to make sure we're not exceeding those numbers, or which number is the correct number, or decide whether there should even be a cap in membership. So those are some of the things that the broad outline that we're looking at, that we're putting together in a form of ordinance that I'd like to circulate. This may not be on for adoption the very next meeting, but at least have a draft circulating for discussion to make some determinations as to what clarifications would be best, and discuss it with the companies and rescue squads out there to see if they have any thoughts on this. But it's something that I think really needs to, we really need to tighten up on. There's a lot of conversations with the CFO and administrator to make sure that these program rules are followed, and to make sure that the ordinance is crafted in a way that's clear to everyone, so there's not confusion between the different fire departments and rescue squads.
Okay, thanks, Brian.
Next thing, train. I'll jump to the next one. Train and bus parking lot fee ordinance amendments. So, as you'll recall, earlier this year we decided that there's a couple things. One was to make the CFO's life easier, and also for accounting purposes and monitoring purposes, to do the parking permit sales on a calendar year basis, which is what our budget year is on, because right now we have it on a July calendar year, so to speak, a fiscal year calendar for the permit sales, but of course our budget calendars on a calendar year basis. So we want to align those years, and that's why we did the 6 months of sales through the end of this year. Another thing we're looking at is, if you recall, in 2009 we had to enter a new lease agreement with New Jersey Transit at the lot, the main train station parking lot, half of which roughly they own, half of which roughly the township owns. At that time, New Jersey Transit required that the township bring its non-resident and resident rates into parity with one another, which we did, which resulted under an agreement with Transit that we did it gradually over a 4 or 5 year period, and stepped up. Of course, as those rates increased to a certain extent, initially it was when the rates went up, we actually had an increase in revenue, even though some of the permit sales went down. But it got to a certain point where the revenue and the permit sales went down. And we were having difficulty covering all the costs associated with the operation of the lot, which we act as the operator of for both our portion and the New Jersey Transit portion under our agreement, and then we make a lease payment to New Jersey Transit after we extrapolate out our costs to them. And we did have some safeguards, fortunately, in the agreement that if the permits of revenue go to a certain level to make sure that we cover our expenses, that payment decreases, which has actually been triggered in the last year because of the lower permit sales. So we're looking at those numbers and evaluating what the proper, we believe that the best numbers would be for the permits to make sure that we cover our costs while not discouraging people to obviously use the train station lot, which there's been a lot of empty spaces in the last year or so since we got to that max parity that was required under our agreement with New Jersey Transit. We've discussed this with Transit and discussed making these amendments because it actually has to be negotiated with New Jersey Transit. It's actually in our agreement with them. So we're in that process, and it will require an ordinance amendment that we want to complete in the early fall so that the permit sales can be set at new rates going forward in the new year. To be determined what those rates are yet based on the analysis. New Jersey Transit is supposed to be providing us some data as well to help in doing that analysis as to their ridership and things of that nature to determine what the, what a reasonable rate would be set for the parking lot. Obviously, as in case circumstances change, whether it's economic activity or whether people are commuting less than they were in the past and things of that nature. And obviously there was some effect, I think, from the Superstorm Sandy as well, and the trains were down for some time after that as well, and other issues. So all of that has to be taken into consideration. We also need to review the bus parking lots, which seem to be overcrowded in some circumstances, and take a look at those and look at it all globally for an ordinance amendment, and probably not the 18th, but for the September meeting, I would suggest.
Thanks.
Okay, the next item, we've already addressed the film ordinance amendments. And then the last items that I have on here are the purchasing agenda, police cars, a snowplow contract for DPW, and then the purchase of the VACCON.
Can I ask what the purpose of the VACCON is?
It's a sewer cleaning truck, checks out sewer pipes, drainage pipes, and has a vacuum component as well.
Do we have one of them now?
But it doesn't work, broke down. It was old, it's been worn out, it can't be repaired.
Does the sewer authority have these?
They do, but they have them for smaller pipes. These are for larger
Storm sewers.
storm sewers. Right. So, I mean, they overlap to a degree, but not really the same function.
Shall we move on to Township Committee comments?
Mr. Massell?
No comment, Madam Mayor.
Dr. Sharpenberger?
I have a comment tonight.
Committeeman Fiore?
I will save my comments to the 18th, thank you.
And Deputy Mayor?
Nothing this evening, Mayor, thank you.
And same for me, I'm going to be saving my remarks until the August 18th meeting. So I think we're going to move on to public portion. Is there anyone from the public wishing to make a comment? Yes, ma'am.
Linda Baum, 19 May Court. I found the conversation about the train parking lot kind of interesting, and Mr. Nelson mentioned that the parking lots where people pick up the buses are actually pretty crowded. And I used to commute, and a consideration when people are deciding what transportation to take is the cost of parking. So I guess one of the reasons that people may choose to take the bus is that they may get free parking there or very, very low-cost parking. So I'm wondering if, considering, it's been mentioned at a couple meetings that we have quite a few available spaces, if maybe we can do a study to find out what might happen if we lowered the cost of parking here a little bit. Would it bring people back? And while we might be getting a little less per vehicle, if we're increasing the number of cars that are parking there, that's potentially a revenue maker. So I'm wondering if there's been a study done or if one might be done.
Isn't that what we're doing?
That's what we're doing, yes, in conjunction with New Jersey Transit. it's actually been going on for some couple of months now since we've had discussions with them, which is why we made the change to the sale of the permits a couple of months ago to be a 6-month period, so we have time to figure that out before adopting an ordinance this fall.
Okay.
And going to the calendar year was one of the components of that too, to make it easier to track in correlation with our budget years.
Okay, so that's good to know, because I know, at least, I haven't looked at the prices, I haven't compared prices recently, but Middletown, you know, had escalated quite a bit compared to neighboring towns.
Because New
over the
Jersey
last few
Transit
years.
forced us to.
Okay.
That was subject to the lease agreement with New Jersey Transit in 2009. And actually, at that time, our rates were far below the surrounding towns. And then, of course, we have
Well,
the,
Red Bank even
have
continues
the-
to be lower now,
we have the
though.
unique situation of having the ferry terminals as well in the township or nearby
Mhm.
too.
Those are
So-
free.
And those are
Free
free parking.
Right.
So there's a number of factors that go into it, and some part of the data that we're getting from New Jersey Transit, as we did in 2009, as to what the travel distances and rates are at different lots that they have and operate, or have other operators operating. That includes the Red Bank lot, which was at that time was $360 a year when we were $250 a year. But we had a non-resident level and a resident level, which they would not allow us to have a variance at. They required the resident and non-resident to be equalized to be an operator of their lots. So that's why it had to go up to the $450 under our agreement with Transit, or they were gonna make us, they were either gonna sue us or make us pay a lot more money to them, so.
Do we have the ability at this point, I guess come the beginning of the year, to actually lower fees if we wanted to, or is it?
That's why we're gonna have an ordinance coming up in September, we're projecting.
That's
Okay.
the likely
Yeah.
outcome.
Okay, that's good.
We just don't know what the number would be, the analysis being
There's
done.
a tipping point that we have to
Yes.
determine.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Any other members of the public wishing to make, yes, sir? Mr. Schwab?
John Schwabel, Hamilton Avenue, Leonardo. Just a couple of quick questions in the interest of brevity here. Does anyone know if the timing on the traffic lights on Normandy Road and Oakville Road have been changed in the last year? The Navy Road and Oakville Road? They used to have to stop there only about 5% of the time, and it seems they have to stop there about half the time now. So change the timing on those ones.
And I think they're driven by the traffic on Normandy Road, so they,
Oh, really?
it varies, yeah.
Okay. And the other question I may have asked before, a couple of years ago, there were some big plans for renovations at Ideal Beach with some structures and everything. Is that on hold now, or what
Well,
happened to that?
it was delayed because of Hurricane Irene, and then again Hurricane Sandy. What happened with that project is that the beach and the dune area needed to be surveyed in order to go ahead with the project. But both storm events had a significant impact on the actual beach and dune topography. So we decided to not resurvey it until after the beach fill project was completed. So it would actually be a real-life finished product, and now it's done. So we plan to proceed and have that survey work updated now.
Yeah, okay, thank you. I may have asked that before. Okay, thank you.
Any other members? Yes, sir?
Yes, Andrew Butzko, 327 Main Street, Port Monmouth. I want to bring up again about the intersection of Cherry Tree Farm Road and Harmony Road, where again today there was another accident. And this is primarily because of the light situation that crosses Harmony Road going out to Highway 35. Driving through this intersection on a daily basis to get out to the highway, I notice a lot of times there are individuals who will try to beat the light to go make a left. A lot of times they are making a left on a left-hand turn, making a left-hand turn on a red light. They're a lawbreaker. But they are halfway through, and I have seen a lot of mishaps at this intersection, and there is going to be one day where I personally believe somebody's going to be killed at this intersection, because you have, over the last a few years, the number of businesses have increased on Highway 35 and Harmony Road, bringing on more traffic. And I believe what needs to be done here is, just like you have with Harmony Road on one side, Kings Highway, on the other side, crossing 35, well, one side goes, then the other side goes onto the highway or whatever. You need a signal on Harmony Road. The problem is not on Cherry Tree Farm Road, it's on Harmony Road. Because what you have is people that are trying to make a left, and a lot of times that traffic, or if they're trying to make a turn from coming from the other direction, from ShopRite, that traffic 9 times out of 10 is backed all the way up to ShopRite, and it's presenting a problem, so I brought this up on a number
Can we do that on
of
our road? Can we delay a traffic crossing on Harmony?
No, well, here's the thing, we've met with the county now twice on this project, and on a number of projects, but this one has come up, and the county have agreed that this is a significant issue, and they actually have already done a preliminary design for a complete redo of that intersection, which I believe they expect to do, to go out to bid for in 2015. We talked about the possibility of putting in left turn signals or left turn phases. It can't be done now because the signals are old, they're not set up for that sort of timing of phasing, and there's not adequate width to make left turn slots. So they are going to be proceeding with that project next year. The other reason it can't be done quite as easily is there's right-of-way that has to be acquired, particularly, I believe, on Harmony Road, in order to make the lanes that you need to have dedicated left turn lanes. And they're in the process now of putting together, plans to go ahead and make those property acquisitions, which, the township will have to work with them on. But it's being designed full steam ahead at this point, and should be under construction next year.
Thank you. Any other members of the public wishing to make a comment? Seeing no other members of the public wishing to make a comment, I move to close public portion and adjourn.
Mayor Fiore?
Yes.
Mayor Michelle?
Yes.
Mayor Schaumburger? Mayor Zambito? And Mayor Moore.
So I don't know what he's talking about them being old. The county was out there last month, I don't know why up there. They took the signs down, everything.
I don't think she's mentioned that.
They just gonna be out there.
I know, so I'm just thinking, I don't remember.
He told you.
Let's have our
Years
bus
now,
run.
we discussed it again.
So, I ask you about, who's the chief?